Okay, I believe we're live. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and maybe even good evening to you, and welcome to another Spider Strategies free monthly education webinar. It is April of 2019, and this month's topic is QuickScore Application Administration Settings, Part 1. Let's get this going. My name is Tom Keating. I have the honor and the privilege of, again, being your presenter today. I'm a customer success advocate here at Spider Strategies, and I invite you to contact me at tom.keating@spiderstrategies.com if I can help you outside of this webinar. A couple of webinar logistics that we always like to cover at the beginning of these meetings. First of all, that this webinar is being recorded for your future use and reference. All of you live attendees are presently muted. I always apologize for that fact, but we've learned over time that if we don't mute the attendees, there's inevitably sort of just background noise will pop up and it just gets distracting. With the fact that you are muted, I would invite you again to send any questions or communications to me either during or even after this meeting to tom.keating@spiderstrategies.com or to our education email at learn@spiderstrategies.com. All right, let's take a look at our agenda for today. It's really intended to be an introduction to the various administrative setting capabilities within QuickScore. And again, this is part 1, and what we've decided to do is try and bite off and attack just 3 broad topics today. First is the personal settings within QuickScore. Secondly is calendars in QuickScore. And lastly, some of the system configuration settings at your fingertips as an administrator of QuickScore. Some of the key questions that I'm going to be trying to keep in mind as I address all of the various administrative settings we've chosen to cover today are just the basics: who, what, where, why, and how. So of course, what is it, where is it, why would you use it, and of course, how may the changes that you make impact QuickScore for either for yourself personally and or for the larger system and other users in general. So let's just start with one of those basic questions is, where are the administrative settings accessed within QuickScore? So I'm showing you here just a screen capture of the QuickScore homepage. If you look to the far lower left corner, I've got a red box around a little gear icon. And to access the settings panel or section of QuickScore, you simply click on that gear icon, and it will change the presentation of the second navigation pane here in white to give you access and visibility to the various settings. I will point out right now that this is a power user's view of the settings section, and it's going to vary depending on what different users are logged in and what types of permissions they have will dictate what they see within this settings pane. So that does bring me around to just a really kind of important key concept to just touch on before we move forward, is that QuickScore system permissions are going to define what users can see and do in QuickScore. And what that means is that different users will, of course, see different views of the settings panel or section in QuickScore based on their own, personal appointed permissions. Now, just to, again, go a little bit deeper into that idea, and this kind of cracks the seal on users and groups and permissions. We're not going to get deep into this today. We'll be talking about that in part 2 of the administration next month. But for a viewer user, you'll note that a viewer-only user has very limited permissions within QuickScore. And as such, when they're logged in and go to access the settings area in QuickScore, you see that they have only access to the personal, quote-unquote, administrative settings within QuickScore. They can make changes to their own accounts, set their own alert preferences, and define broadcast alerts. Similarly, a communication or updater user, you'll note that within the system, they have more permissions, about 3 times as many permissions as a viewer user has. But once again, when they're logged in and they go access the settings area or section of QuickScore, they again have that same limited view of the settings pane, allowing them access only to their own, again, personal control or personal settings. Lastly, for the administrative or power users, this just gives you a quick view of how many myriad and varied permissions a power user and administrator is provided within QuickScore. And with that type of permissions and that group ownership or group membership, a power user, when they click on the settings button in the lower left, will be provided with a full-on settings section navigation pane, giving them access to personal system setup, security, configuration, monitoring, and advanced settings. So I'm going to be logged in all day long in the demonstration area as a power user with those full administrative permissions. But just remember that if you log in as either a user or a viewer or a communications user, you may not be able to see all of the administrative settings that I'll be covering today. Again, just a quick reminder about what we're going to be biting off from that relatively extensive list of administrative settings that you can work with. We're just going to keep it simple today. We'll address the personal settings, we'll look at the calendars, and again, then we'll get into a fairly large area, which is the system configuration settings. All right. Again, I'll just remind you here the two areas that actually three areas that I'll be working in today within QuickScore is under settings. We'll be addressing the personal at the very top. Right underneath it, there's the setup section with the calendars. And then a little bit further down is the configuration area or section of the settings interface. And that's where we'll actually be probably spending most of our time today. Okay. With that said, enough PowerPoint presentation, enough slideware. Let's get into QuickScore. So I've logged into QuickScore here again as a power user, an administrative user. I've landed at, of course, my personalized, QuickScore homepage. And as we discussed, I'll go to the far lower left corner and click on the settings gear to open up the settings navigation pane here in the sort of middle left. Again, we're going to start by addressing the personal area or personal section under settings. And again, this will apply, these three different areas will apply to all the different user types. So of course, the account information is presented over on the right. You see my system-defined username. I do not have access or edit capabilities on the official system username, but I, of course, can control what email address I'd like to employ if I'm going to be asking the QuickScore system to push emails out to me, or if I'm going to be receiving emails from QuickScore. Of course, I can define my own, preferred first name and last name. And then, of course, I have complete control over my own password. Just an example of one simple change I might make here, just to give you a sense. If you come in here and change it, so I'll provide a middle initial. Note that I've added F as a middle initial, and if you look to the lower right-hand corner, the Save button has become active. So I, of course, can click Save to save, in this case, that minor change to, my account information that I'm able to provide here. Moving down the list, let's move into the Alert Preferences area. This is kind of opens the door to a really powerful capability within QuickScore, is your ability as a personal user to subscribe and set up the alerts that you want to receive from the QuickScore system. And I'd like to just start at the top because there's a setting up here that's very important. It's called Email Preferences. And this is where you as a user get to define whether you want to receive emails tied to alerts that are going to be generated by the system. So the majority of what you're doing here is setting up alerts, QuickScore system generated alerts, but you also get the opportunity to ask for emails to be sent to you, for instance, immediately once an alert is generated, should the system email you with information and access to QuickScore and to that alert. Or you can set it up to be every night or every week on a particular day. So I'm going to go ahead and leave my settings at immediately. You see that presently I already have 2 existing alert subscriptions, one out to leads, one to product revenue. Here we just want to give you a brief introduction and education on how to expand the list of subscriptions. Towards the upper right of the My Alert Subscriptions box, you click the Add button to add a new subscription, and you'll see that you have 3 different choices about what type of subscription you're looking to set up. The first is Score Change, second is Measure Value Change, third is Notes Added. So let's imagine that I'm someone who is now going to be interested and responsible to information from our customer support department, and I want to know about help desk calls. And I'd like an alert around calls handled. And I'd like to know if the score being reflected for the calls handled performance is down towards the bottom. I can either select below or equal to, above or equal to or exactly equal to a given score. So in my case, I would like to be alerted if, you know, the calls handled score dips below, let's say 5 for that particular scorecard item. Just quickly note that under this scorecard item, you can also set up a level of alerting at, let's say, an objective level, where all the measures that fall under an objective could trigger alerts for you if any of their scores fall below, in this case, 5. In our case, we're just focusing on the one calls handled measure. I'd like to be alerted score under 5, and I'll click add. So now I've got this calls handled alert set up. It reflects for me how I set it up, and I'm good to go there. Another quick example of another type of alert is the measure value change. Again, you'll find this to be very similar to what we just did. Again, I'll go into customer support and the help desk calls area, and let's just focus on average abandonment rate. So in this case, you're focusing on an actual value, not a score, but an actual performance value. And let's just say that if this falls, you know, average abandonment rate falls below 7%, or actually let's make it if it goes above 7%, I want to be alerted. So I'll set it to 7%. Again, click add. So there's another alert that I have subscribed to. Again, it's reflecting how it's been set up to me. And then one last alert, just to cover all the 3 types, is notes added. And again, this is pretty straightforward and intuitive. Again, I'll go to the customer support and say, again, in the help desk calls area, you know, that if someone provides a note to the % calls answered measure, I just want to be informed about the existence of that new note so that I can review it, potentially reply to it, and get involved with any kind of collaborative communication around that particular measure. So that is how you can voluntarily subscribe to alerts. Now, of course, once an alert exists, should later you want to make adjustments to it, maybe I want to change, you know, the percentage value of an average abandonment rate, I of course can click edit. It will reopen the same interface I employed to set it up, and maybe I'll up it to 12%. So you can make those changes. And of course, should you want to delete any alert subscriptions, you simply click the delete, you know, garbage can. It'll confirm for you, do you really want to delete it? And you say delete, and it's gone. So that's your alert subscription opportunities as a personal user. The last opportunity here under personal is the broadcast alert. This, again, its name kind of conveys exactly what this gives you the opportunity to do, is you can type in your broadcast message here, whatever it may be. Then over on the right, you select the recipients. And again, you're going to be presented with a list of all the different groups and users that exist within the QuickScore system, and you can select an individual person that should go to, and or if this is something that needs to go to absolutely everyone within the system, you can set that up as well. So you can have multiple recipients defined for this broadcast alert. One minor thing here towards the lower left, this send notification and a pop-up. What that means that if someone is presently logged into QuickScore, when you send this broadcast alert, it will not only add an alert to their listing of alerts that they've received, but it will also throw a pop-up message at them live at that time, so they become immediately aware of it. So if they're, you know, working in a scorecard or something and aren't intending to go back to their home page, a little pop-up message will appear. And then, of course, to send that, you just go ahead and click, you know, send broadcast alert, and that alert will then, you know, be sent. And just to reflect where all of these alerts, just to hopefully remind you of where all these alerts are going to appear within QuickScore, on your home page, right smack in the middle, there's a new alerts area. Okay. Now it's showing me, they don't really only have the real estate to show me 4 alerts, but you see right here at the top of that list is that broadcast alert that I just sent. So it's appearing there. I didn't ask for it to appear in the pop-up, so it didn't show me the pop-up message. Okay. So that takes care of the 3 different capabilities within the personal area under the settings, control panel in QuickScore. Let's move on then to the next area that we want to discuss, our next agenda topic, which is calendars. So calendars exist under setup. I should say that from this point forward, the topics we're going to address, I mentioned it earlier, but let me just reiterate it, that from this point forward, anything we cover, someone has to have appropriate power user permissions to have visibility and access to all of these ongoing settings and controls that you'll watch me work with to this point. What we've covered till now, viewer users and communication users should have those permissions unless they have been specifically removed from those viewers or communication users. Okay, moving ahead then into calendars. Let's open up the calendars area within the settings pane and reflect over on the right the existence of, in this case, at this point in time, 3 different calendars. We have a monthly system calendar that's been defined, and the months that have been provided or defined within the system within QuickScore are over presented on the right. And it's a fairly extensive list. We've got, you know, months extending all the way to 2024. We've extended our calendar quite far into the future to be ready for future, you know, analysis and evaluation. We have a yearly calendar, again, covering the years 2012 through to 2024. And then we have a custom yearly fiscal calendar, which has been created. In this case, it only has one calendar within it for the fiscal year of 2018. Now, this listing of calendars is fine. I wouldn't consider it to be particularly robust or complete, you know, because if we want to do some analysis by quarter. Oh, before I get into the quarter, let me just reflect, hearkening back to my questions about how, what, where, why, and what does this impact. These calendars that you set up and are presented here directly, of course, impact all the rest of the QuickScore system in terms of calendar periods that are available to you, particularly for viewing and analysis within, for instance, the scorecards area. If I go to the calendar period selector, which exists in the upper right of virtually all of the QuickScore interfaces, the listing of calendars that's available here in this drop-down comes directly from the list of calendars we were just viewing. So monthly, yearly, and that custom yearly fiscal calendar are the only calendars that I can work with at this point in time. And of course, if I select, for instance, the custom year 2018, notice that that's the only value it gives me in the drop-down, because you saw that we only had one custom, you know, yearly fiscal calendar set up. Whereas if I select yearly and click the drop-down, you saw that we had defined years from 2018 down through, you know, 2024. So the point here is that within this application administration and the calendars, what you set up here directly impacts what you're able to use and view and how you view your information throughout all of QuickScore. Now, what we want to do is just teach you how to add a calendar. In my mind, it would be very helpful to have a quarterly, Gregorian standard quarterly calendar available to us for, you know, analysis and evaluation of our data. So I'll click the Add Calendar button, and at the top you get 2 choices of what type of calendar are you creating. It's either a standard calendar or a custom calendar. If you select standard, there is a drop-down of calendars that are out of the box that you can choose to add. It's showing me the standard calendars that have not yet been employed. We already are using monthly. We're already using yearly, so it's not going to show up in this list. I'd like to add a basic standard calendar for quarterly. When you create a new calendar, you can make settings to prevent measure value updates after a given quantity of days and prevent note changes after a given quantity of days as well, tied to this use of this particular calendar when measures might be set up employing this calendar frequency or periodicity. I'm going to leave those blank for this case, and I'll just click Add. And so we now have a quarterly calendar that exists at the bottom of the list of the calendars. Please be aware that in terms of presentation of these calendars, when you're out, again, in QuickScore and using the calendar period selector, it's going to reflect verbatim the order that they are visually set up here. So I'm going to drag and drop quarterly up under monthly, because for me, it just makes more sense to have a drop down that says monthly, then quarterly, then yearly. Over on the right, if I could just show you what has been created for the quarterly calendar, you see that what it did is it looked back about 1.5 years here and said, well, how many quarters should I provide out of the box for this new calendar? And so it's only at this point giving me quarters going from Q1 of 2019 out, 6 quarters to Q2 of 2020. If I want to extend that calendar, I can easily do so by clicking the Extend Calendar button in the upper right corner. And I can say, let's extend this calendar out all the way, like the other calendars that we have, all the way out through 2024. And I'll just stay here in April. Let's say, let's extend it out through the 30th of April of 2024 and click extend. So I now have a quarterly calendar with all these different quarterly periods going all the way out through 2024. So those standard calendars are very easy to create, very easy to extend or update out to whatever time period you'd like. Another type of calendar that you might want to create is a custom calendar. So I'll click on the Add Calendar button again. This time I'll select Custom. And in this case, I'll just show you the starting of the idea of a fiscal quarter calendar. Okay. And again, I'm not going to prevent days or prevent notes changes, and I'll click Add. So this new fiscal quarter calendar exists. Note that on the right, there are no existing periods. And this is where our software doesn't have the ability to read your mind and understand exactly what the setup for your custom, if you will, fiscal quarters should be. So this is where you need to manually add a period, and we'll call this Q1 of 2019. And let's imagine that this actually, 2019 starts back in October of 2018. So I'm going to go back 1 year to 2018. I'll move ahead to October. And we'll start it on October 1 of 2018. And we'll have it run through, again, of course, 2018. And it'll be December of 2018 that we want to go to. So I'll go backwards in this case. So this will end on the 31st of December of I lost my 2018. There we go, of 2018. Okay, again, it reflects the dates that you selected in the calendar down here along the bottom. You can visually confirm that and click Add Period. So I have just created one of my fiscal quarters, and then you just proceed to do this again and again and again to define all the quarters that you need within that custom fiscal quarter calendar. All right, so I believe that covers the calendar functionality for us. And again, just taking note of our time, we've got a lot here still to cover today. So we'll move on to the third agenda item, third topic, which is moving down into the configuration area of, again, the application settings. So I'll click on, under configuration, I'll click on application administration. And again, I alluded to this being, there's a lot of settings in here. We're going to be spending the rest of our time together here looking at all the myriad settings that exist here under application administration. And these are, these are your configuration settings that you're allowed to or able to create here on the application side of life. And I'll do my level best to get through all these in the next half hour or so. Let's start, of course, at the top. Good place to start. At the very top, we've got a section. It's called email notifications. I'll tell you up front that that name is a little bit misleading, because what these really allow you to set up are alert, QuickScore system alert notifications. Now, with that said, you know that just a minute ago, we looked at the alert preferences, right? And if I, as a user, set myself up to be alerted via email whenever an alert was generated that I subscribed to, that will happen. So if we jump back again into the application administration area, there is an underlying kind of implication that if a user has set themselves up to receive emails tied to alerts, then this actually will achieve emailing as well. But without having voluntarily asked for emails, all these settings are going to impact system-generated alerts, not necessarily directly emails. Okay, so red measures without tests. And a lot of these are really very common sense, straightforward settings, and many of them are simple yes and no settings. So red measures without tasks. The question is should the system create an alert and send it to the owner or the updater of measures if that measure does not have a task? And in certain cases, there will be a relationship between tasks that are set up in the initiatives area. And I'm just going to jump to a different organization here just to show you a task here. So under the build SEO capability, there is a task to status update to the board. This is a task that has been set up. And note that under the related items here down towards the right, network availability is a measure that has been related to that task. Okay, so this is an example of a measure that is tied to or related to a task. So in that case, that type of measure, if we go back to the red measures without tasks, it will receive, someone would receive, red measures without that. So if it turns red, this is not going to trigger an alert to the owner or the updater of that particular measure that we just looked at, the network availability, because it's set to no. All right. Okay, moving on. Notes replied to. Again, very straightforward. If a note has been created within the QuickScore system and someone replies to it, should the author of that original note be alerted that his or her initial note has been replied to? So again, your choice here is yes or no. And a common question about this is, if I reply to a note and then someone else comes along and replies again to that note, would I, as a replier to that original note, receive an alert? The answer is no. Just the original author of the note receives an alert if anybody replies to that initial note. Okay, and again, your choices here are yes or no. Red measures upon turning red. This is a very straightforward one. If a measure becomes red, should the system alert, again, the owner and the updater of that of that measure? Should an alert be generated informing them that a particular measure that they own or update has now become red? Next one down here, very, very powerful one set up here. Measure update reminders. This is one of the favorites amongst our customers, one of the favorite features with regard to alerting is, should you send out alerts to inform the updaters of measures that the due date for the measure that they're responsible for updating is coming up. So you can send out, an alert 3 days before the end of a given time period when a given measure is about to be required to be updated. You can also do a retroactive, after, let's say that after a couple days, let's say 1 day after the end of a given time period when a measure should have been updated, just again, send an alert to the updater of that measure to inform them that, again, it should have been updated. So and again, you can set up as many different time periods for, the pushing out of alerts to the owners and the updaters of alerts here within the properties. The next one here, notify owners of parents of linked items when source is modified. This one's kind of obscure. Let me just give you a where this might come into play example. So if I go out to the scorecards area, I'm not going to save any changes. Actually, we'll go ahead and save those changes. I'll go back out to scorecards. And if we take a look at our Mobile World Inc. organization and our classic balance scorecard in here for the Mobile World balance scorecard, and go to the financial perspective and open up the increased revenue objectives, you'll see here that this increased revenue objective is being provided with measure information from underlying measures that are links. You see the little two chain link icon to the left of product revenue. This product revenue is linking out to another instance of product revenue that actually lives out under the financial scorecard. So if I highlight product revenue and click the info button towards the upper right, it'll tell me where is that linked to. So if I click on product revenue, and here is the original source product revenue measure. Again, it's in the financial organization and the financial profit and loss scorecard. And the question here is, if someone comes in and makes a fundamental edit or change to that product revenue measure, where it really lives, if I click edit and go down here and maybe make a change to the red flag value to say, let's make it just 430,000. So I make a fundamental change and click save, which I'm not going to do, but if I make that change, the question is, should the person who's responsible for that objective, I'm going to go back to Mobile World, back to financial, this increased revenue objective, should the owner of that increased revenue objective be informed that the original product revenue that this product revenue links to has been changed? So that's kind of a long story behind a relatively simple setting here under application administration, is to notify owners of parents. So in this case, it's an objective the owner of that objective when the source of in that case, the product revenue measure was modified in any way. I'll just leave that as no. All right, moving on down the list, scoring. Let's talk about how scoring is handled within QuickScore. First of all, should scores be visible? This is a basic, really intuitive setting just to reflect very quickly with you what type of change, making it no would have. If I go back out again to scorecards and just look even right here at Mobile World Balanced Scorecard, how are we doing overall across all of our perspectives, everything? We presently have a score of 5.6. If I jump back into the application administration area and change the score is visible to no, and then lower right-hand corner, save, and then go back out to my scorecards and take a look at that same Mobile World Balanced Scorecard, the 5.6 is no longer being presented. It is, of course, behind the scenes, still being scored. That score is being accurately reflected in terms of the color that is being presented. The system knows about the score. It's just not showing the score at this point in time, thanks to the setting change that I just made. I'll go ahead and put that back to yes, because I like to see scores everywhere. The next one down is a very subtle one, but it's important to understand. Ignore gray scorecard items for color roll-up. So hopefully you understand that within QuickScore, what happens with scores and colors, I'll go ahead and save that. With scores and colors, if I again go to this financial perspective and look at the financial score and the color that is provided right now for financial, it's 4.6. Look over to the right, it's colored yellow, it's 4.6. Well, where is that coming from? It's coming from a weighted average roll-up of all of the underlying objectives of increased revenue, improved profitability, and reduce sales overhead costs. Now, if I go back in time to February of 2019, we have scores and values for all three of those objectives because all the underlying measures have been updated. However, in March of 2019, some of the measures haven't been updated, and thus the objectives are not yet scored for improved profitability. We don't have information yet, and reduce sales overhead costs. We don't have information yet. But take note that what is presently happening is that the financial perspective is rolling up whatever it does have. So it has a score for increased revenue at 4.6. As the only score that financial has, it's reflecting that, okay? Now, if there is another way to approach this is to say, don't score financial at all until we have scores for improved profitability and reduce sales overhead costs. Don't show me 4.6 because that may be perceived as misleading because it really is only reflecting what increased revenue is doing. So back to this administrative setting. I go back in here, under scoring, ignore gray scorecard items for color roll-up. So right now what's happening is it's ignoring those two objectives that don't have scores and is just reflecting the one score that it does. If I make this no and say, no, don't ignore those, just hang out and wait, and then click save, and then go back out to that same scorecard in the same area and take a look at financial and wait for that change to be reflected. I'm going to do a quick refresh. Come on. Oh boy, doesn't seem to be working for me. Yeah, it's because notice here at the top, the data hasn't been recalculated yet, but will be soon. So I'm trying not to be impatient, but I'd like to reflect this before moving on. There we go. So notice now that the financial perspective is completely unscored. We still have a score for increased revenue. We still don't have scores for improved profitability, of course, and reduced sales overhead costs. So financial is effectively waiting for those other objectives to get the scores before anything is reflected in financial. So that's the nature of that particular scoring property. I'm going to go ahead and put it back to yes, because I do like those scores to be rolled up with whatever is available. And again, I'll just click save in the lower right corner. Okay, by default, missing values. This is just a default setting. This pertains to when someone is creating new measures and sets something up with a calculation. So note that it says right now it's set to make entire equation blank. Your other choices are treat as 0, treat as non-applicable, and treat as blank. So we'll leave it as it is, make entire equation blank, and again, just show you where that comes into play, what it impacts. So I'm going to go back out to the scorecards area, and in this case, I'll jump to a different organization of financial to get directly to one of our measures. I'll go pick on product revenue again, and I'll edit product revenue. So imagine that I'm originally just setting up product revenue, and hopefully you're aware of all the myriad properties that need to be defined for any particular measure. And in the series area, if I were to change the actual value from manual to calculated, note here that the question is, what should happen if any missing values, right? Any missing values makes the entire equation blank. That's the setting right there. That's what we saw. The other choices, of course, that I can employ here at the measure setup level are the other three choices that we saw in the application administration area. I can change the default, but just note that the default was set to be any missing values makes entire equation blank. All right, and again, that's where, again, I'll get out of here, back into the administration area. That's where that scoring, this one right here, that's what that impacts, is what is there by default when someone first sets up a measure. The system assumes that this is what should be done, but you can override that at the measure level. Okay, moving on, the show N/A option. This comes into play, and it ties directly again to measures, which of course then are going to be rolled up, of course, to scores. But the idea here is, when someone is updating a measure, should they have an option to say this measure is just not applicable for this period of time? And what it does, again, I'll just jump back out to scorecards. What that setting, note that it was set to yes. So if I go again back out to a measure and say, let's edit this measure. So I'm basically going to update this measure with an actual value. Notice that out to the right, there's a little, I always call these like a no smoking circle. There's a circle with a line through it. What this allows you to do is say, for this single time period, just effectively ignore this measure. It's just not applicable for this particular time period of, in this case, March of 2019. Don't bother to try and calculate it in, just ignore it. So that is something, should that be available when someone is updating a measure or not, is the question. So if I cancel out of here and go back to the application administration and go again to the show NA options and say, no, don't present that, and then click save, and then go back again to scorecards, find again that same product revenue measure, click edit. Note that out to the left of March 2019, there is no longer, again, I'll call it the no smoking circle with the circle with the line through it. It doesn't exist. I have to provide, value, because this measure needs to be factored in, calculated in. I can't just absolve myself of responsibility for providing information during that time period. Okay, moving on. In application administration, we're still talking scoring here. With the non-measure colors, this applies to levels above measures. So they could be objectives, perspectives, scorecards, themes, again, elements of your scorecard that are not measures. You guys know that coloring within for a measure is tied to the scoring type that you select and the colors that you choose to use for the measure. But as those, again, weighted scores are rolled up from measure to objective to perspective and so on, the question is, when you get to the objective, perspective, and even scorecard level, what type of colors, what color scheme, if you will, should be employed for the presentation of colors based on the weighted average scores that roll up to that level. The default and by far most commonly employed is 3-color, but just be aware, you can just make it red and green if you want. You can make 3-color, 4-color with blue, 4-color with orange, and so on, and even the 4-color scored middle. So again, most customers just leave this at 3-color, but be aware of it. The enable forward effect scoring is certainly one of the more obscure settings that's in here, and to be honest, it's one of the more difficult ones to explain. I will give it my best shot here quickly. Within QuickScore, if a measure is set up, bear with me here, I'm just going to find where I need to be. I've set up a measure here called yearly measure. And if we look at this measure, you'll see that it has been set up with a calendar periodicity of yearly, okay? This measure really only expects to be updated on a yearly basis. Once a year, give me end of year results, that's all it expects. Now, with that said, if you view that measure by a different, calendar periodicity, so in this case, you can see I'm looking at it for March of 2019, and I can move ahead in time and continue to view this, this measure. Of course, because it's a yearly value, each year it's going to just roll across, presenting the exact same number for every single month. But note here that at the end of 2020, I don't have data yet for 2021. Now, if I were to change the setting on this enable forward looking, what QuickScore would do is it would continue to project out the performance that it had at the end of the year 2021 into these, the year 2020 is what is complete. As I analyze 2021, it would carry forth the last value that it had in December of 2020 into January and February and March of 2021. Until, of course, you provide the actual 2021 year-end value, then of course it will adjust and show what has really been provided. This falls in one of these categories where I'm not sure why, this is just my personal opinion, I'm not sure why someone would want to see forward effect scoring. I think it's a property that was created but for one particular custom need a while ago. So be aware that that's what it does. Most likely you're going to be just leaving that as no. And then lastly here under scoring, divide by 0 equals 0, yes or no. And the idea here is if you have set up any type of a calculation for a measure, we talked about a calculated measure just a minute ago. If you set up a calculation with a division process and you end up in a situation where the denominator for that calculation for a given time period ends up being 0, what should the scoring do, right? Should it give it a 0? Or if you say no, then what it will do is go up and reflect what is happening for missing values. So back up to the missing values property will impact if you say, look, if it doesn't equal, if you say it equals 0, then of course, if you divide by 0, you'll get a score of 0. If not, and you say no, then it says, well, by default, if this is going to be a missing value, what should I do with it in terms of scoring and the use of scores as those scores are rolled up throughout the system? Okay, moving further down the list here. General settings, the default calendar period. This is pretty straightforward. When someone logs in to QuickScore, what time period should they see by default? And again, your two choices are the most recently completed period. So here we are in April. If I log in anew and go to look at some scorecard elements, it's going to show me March information because I want to see the fully completed, most recently completed time period. Other choice here is to look at the current period. In that case, you may be viewing your scorecard without any data if the information has not yet been completed or provided for that time period. So it's really your choice what you want to see when you log in. Speedometers and gauges. Should red always be on the left, or is it appropriate in some cases for the red to be on the right? So if you've got a measure like customer churn where a large number is bad, what QuickScore is going to want to do is by default it's going to put the red over on the right tied to the larger number, the larger actual performance value. But in certain cases you may say nope, absolutely positively all speedometers throughout the entire system should present the red section of a speedometer over on the left. So it's again a yes or no. Displaying IDs, this is just a question of whether your underlying system IDs, every element, every entity throughout all of QuickScore has behind the scenes, a unique system ID. The question is, should these things be displayed? Again, the question here is, well, where would that have any impact? Why would I care whether these IDs are displayed? Where would they show up? So I'll just say, don't save here. If I am looking at an element here, I'll keep working with my yearly measure and I go up to its info. The question is right here, as I'm looking at info, should I see the ID or not? Also, ID is a column that you can include in reports. So the question there is, should ID be available to you as you're authoring a report? Should you be able or allowed to present a system ID column in that report or not? All right, moving ahead here. And for these next 5 settings, they're all fairly straightforward. They all pertain to passwords for QuickScore. So the question is, should you enforce, strong passwords that require numbers and letters, or do you just leave the password open to whatever somebody wants to provide, whether it's strong or weak, and who cares? So it's either, again, a yes or no, whether you're going to enforce. How many changes before a password can be reused? So someone wants to continually use the same password again and again, and they had it a month ago, they take a month to create a new one, then they go back to try and use the one that they used 2 months ago. How many changes do they have to make before they can go back and reuse an old password? Next one down, how often do you want to force users to change their passwords? How many days are they allowed to work with a given password before being forced to change it? How many invalid login attempts? Next one down, how many invalid login attempts are allowed before they get locked out? Your choices here are never, or down to, looks like we got a maximum number of what, 10 here, okay? And then this last one here regarding passwords is allow password via reset, I should say, via email. Common question is, where does that impact? What does that mean? What it means is, if I go back here, and I'm going to have to log out here very quickly, so I'm going to log out, and I'm going to log back in. Notice here at the bottom, underneath the login screen, notice it says, it's kind of subtle, but it says, lost your password, question mark. So if that setting is on to allow password reset via email, this will appear. If it's not on, then that message or that option will not appear. That's the basics of that application setting on email. Let's see, what was it called again? Allow password reset via email. Okay, show red measure indicator for scores less than. This pertains to, if you're looking at a scorecard, right now it's set to 3.34. What this drives or directs is when you are looking at a scorecard element and you have this measures tab, you've got the overview and the measures, and again, those are going to be visible whether you're looking at a scorecard or a perspective or an objective or even down to a measure. Notice that on the measures tab, in certain cases, there's a red circle with an exclamation point. That is what we're talking about with the setting that we just looked at here about what score should be set for that red measure indicator. Next one down, require a note when updating measures that have a score. So should an updater of a measure be forced to provide a note if the value that they're going to provide is going to generate a score less than 7 in this case, or 5, or whatever you want to put in here. So you can require notes to be provided in association with measure updates. Prevent scorecard, next one down, prevent scorecard items this many days. Okay, when you set up a measure, you can define an archive date. Actually, for many various elements throughout the software, you can define not just measures, you can define archive dates, okay? And here the question is, after an archive date has arrived, can someone still get into the system and make any kind of changes to that element even after the archive date? The archive date removes it, of course, from view within QuickScore, but it doesn't remove it from the database. So theoretically, someone can still get in and make changes. But if you make a setting here, it'll prevent them from making any types of changes to any element of QuickScore after a given defined archive date. Moving on, send support request emails. This is what's going to be the destination when someone on the home page goes to the lower right corner and goes to the QuickScore support area and says, contact us. When this is generated, the question is, where is this email going to go? So that is that setting around the email destination. Let's see. Year-to-date calendar. So this is where you define, which calendar should be employed for year-to-date information in reports and or year-to-date calculations using the to-date or year-to-date function within QuickScore. The question here is simply which year calendar should be employed. If you've got a fiscal yearly calendar, you could employ that. If you have a standard Gregorian yearly calendar, you can use that. So you need to pick whatever year calendar is appropriate for any year-to-date calculations within QuickScore. And then lastly, in this section, the show welcome message. Again, back out to the home page. Presently it's set to yes. If I go to the home page, this area right up here towards the upper third of the home page is, of course, our welcome message, and that is what that setting controls, whether this welcome message is presented or not. You don't have to show a welcome message if you'd rather devote more of the real estate on the home page to other things, providing more more area for responsibilities and for alerts and what have you, you can do that as well by removing the presentation of the welcome message. All right, again, trying to be cognizant of time here, moving along quick. Last in this first column is authentication settings. You have 3 different choices for how users, when they log into QuickScore, are authenticated. The default is to employ the QuickScore authentication method with users and passwords created and defined within the QuickScore's own database repository, okay? Your other choices are Ldap. If you select Ldap, then of course you need to provide information about what Ldap server you are going to be tying to or linking to, and the information that can come from that QuickScore can then leverage, again, for authentication purposes. Your other choice here as well is OpenID Connect. Similarly, if you make that selection, again, you need to provide some more, detailed information about the authorization endpoint and the token and user and client and all that information tied to and related to the OpenID Connect method for authorization. We'll just go ahead and leave that at QuickScore. All right, we're doing okay here. One more section to cover. This one is really pretty straightforward. Most of the settings in here are very intuitive under data format. So default number precision. When you're viewing, information in QuickScore, how many decimal places do you want to see? And the default here is 1 digit, but of course you can expand or bring it down just to whole numbers at 0. The currency precision, same deal. If you're looking at, let's say, good old American greenback dollars, do you want to see it down to the cent, or is it okay just to round it up to just whole dollars? Your choice. The display format for usernames. Earlier we took a look at, the account info where a user is able to provide, their own preferred first name and last name. And then the question here is, how should those first and last names be presented within QuickScore? What type of format would you like to employ? There's a listing here of different formats, commas, first, last first, what have you. Under the user titles, if you want to get a little bit more formal and provide some titles, Mr., Mrs., what have you, Your Honor, anything you might want to provide to leverage in terms of, again, identifying users in things like reports and user log information, you can define values in here. If you do, just make sure that they're pipe separated so that they become available in a list. Again, moving down, the measure units. This, again, gives you the opportunity when you're setting up a measure. I'm going to pause and show you an example of this. Notice here that presently it's set to hours, days, and minutes. There may be other units that you might want to be able to leverage or reflect within QuickScore. So again, I'll pause on this one quickly and go to scorecards, and I'll go to an area where I'll pick again on our friend product revenue and just take a look at product revenue. I will edit it. And again, imagine that either I'm editing this or just setting it up. If I were to change product revenue to be the data type of number, notice that below it, there is a units field, or units property that has not yet been defined. I can take advantage of whatever units have been defined out in the application settings. So here again are the hours, days, and minutes that we just saw listed. And so this is the setting that we were just viewing will provide the values available in the units property for a measure. I don't want to save any changes there. All right, folks, we're getting there. We're getting close. Allowed tags. Okay, this again, tags tie out to when you're first creating a new scorecard. What you can do is provide a tag, which basically is a term that someone can use when they are leveraging our search capabilities or search functionality. So if you want to make it easy for someone to find scorecard elements that fall under a given scorecard for finance, let's say, you can create a tag called finance, and then when someone goes looking for that scorecard, maybe they can't find it, they can employ the tag that you defined here. And lastly, the default currency unit. Again, there's going to be a relatively small list out of the box here for, common currencies. And then also you can extend or expand that list by choosing additional world currencies. You see here that we've got a very extensive listing of all the various, world currencies. And maybe I'll just, at the very top, I'll add the Afghanistan, whatever it is, and then click update. And then now if I go to my list, I see that there's that Afghanistan currency available in the drop-down list for me to employ. All right, folks, that's a lot. I know I did my FedEx fast talking through most of that. And we are very close to the top of the hour. So let me just jump back out here to, again, my PowerPoint presentation and just, again, step back and just review with you, again, what we covered here today, all about administrative settings, your personal settings, the creation and administration of calendars, and fairly quickly, the various system configuration settings that we just took a look at. Before I let you go, I would like to invite you to please, again, join us in May for our next free Spider Strategies education webinar. We will be covering part 2 of administration. You saw that there were plenty of other administrative capabilities within the settings pane that we just didn't have time to get to today. We'll be attacking those next month. And last, before we wrap up and I let you go, I again want to thank you very much for attending. Really appreciate you taking the time to watch. I hope this was helpful and educational for you. Again, my name is Tom Keating. And again, feel free to reach out to me personally at tom.keating@spiderstrategies.com, or of course, reach out to us at our education department at learn@spiderstrategies.com. Thank you again for your time. Have a great day.